Do you remember growing your first $900 tomato and thinking, gosh, if I just had gone to the grocery store, it would have been way cheaper? Yeah, same. But we are not doing that anymore. Welcome to the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, and together we are going to build our farms, homesteads, and gardens without destroying our finances. So let's get that bag of soil and money.
Welcome back to the Food, Farm, and Finance Podcast. I'm your host, Austin Graff, coming at you with another great episode. Today, we are taking a break from the garden, and we are talking about livestock on a small scale. So if you have a small property, this is perfect for you. We're going to discuss your best livestock options, how you can produce the most food in the smallest amounts of space. And I think this is a really fun one. A little trigger warning though, we are going to be talking about utilizing animal products and raising animals for meat. So if those values don't align with yours, totally understand, no problem. Skip forward to a future episode or consider listening to one from the past. And we would love to have you here though if you want to hear about it, but we don't want to hurt anyone's feelings. But we are talking about raising our own meat in this episode. But before we get into all that, a message from today's sponsors. Today's sponsor is Duck River Apothecary. Yep, that's my herbal tea wellness brand. Yes, I produce lots of little tea blends from my farm here. And let me tell you, they are coming in clutch right now. I don't know if you can tell, but I have been very sick. I have had one of those colds that is just getting me down, and I'm currently drinking our Cold Calmer tea. This is delicious. It's got wild cherry bark in there, marshmallow root, licorice root. It's helping me feel a little bit better so I can get through this podcast. And speaking of getting through this podcast, if you want to support this podcast and help get us through to a longer term, more stable situation, you could totally help us by supporting us by simply buying a little bit of tea. So cozy up with a little tea from duckriverapothecary.com during the next episode, and we would so greatly appreciate it. Now, back to the episode. Okay, so producing your own meat on the farm and having livestock on the farm is a really big step. And a lot of people don't take that step because frankly, who has the space and who has the time? Well, today I want to talk about the livestock options that you have if you want to produce a lot of meat, potentially a lot of animal products in a small space. And I think this is absolutely critical. Because let's just be honest, nutritionally speaking, we do need protein, and the amount of calories we're producing by growing our garden is probably plenty good, but not necessarily enough. So if we're really trying to strive for that self-sufficiency goal and offsetting a huge amount of our grocery budget, then we need to be producing a little bit of meat if we are going to eat meat in our household. So I have a list of some of the top ones, and some of them are going to surprise you and some of them are not going to surprise you. But first, I want to say the reason I'm so passionate about producing my own meat is because you are in control of the animal's welfare. So I don't have a huge issue with commercial agriculture in the sense that we're doing what we've got to do to feed the world. But what I do have an issue with is we often do what we got to do, and that does mean sacrificing animals' welfare so that way we can have a cheaper chicken or a cheaper beef, etc. I don't love the commercial meat industry. I don't like how they pack animals into facilities, and I'm just not a fan. So I'd much rather raise my own meat on my own property and know that they're getting the best life. They're getting to roll around in grass. They're getting a very natural existence. That is what I want, and I think that's what they're healthiest for, and I think that's what's healthiest for me. So, without further ado, let's get into the first one, and that is chickens. Yes, chickens. Now, I know that's going to come as a shock, right? Not really, because I've done an entire episode about how you should have chickens. But if you got a small space, this one is the one. I think of chickens as the gateway livestock for people. They get a few chickens, and next thing you know, they've got a water buffalo and a giraffe coming, and people just don't know how things got so out of hand. That's what chickens do. But chickens also produce loads of eggs in a small amount of space. So it's very easy to have a chicken tractor that is a mobile unit that goes around your backyard, or a stationary coop. Typically, chickens need a couple square feet in the coop and a couple square feet in the run. The more you can give them, the happier they will be. But you can get away with some skimpy spacing, especially if you are willing to free range your birds throughout the day so they can get out, stretch their legs, have plenty of space and fresh air. So I think chickens are definitely the number one. They produce loads and loads of eggs. You could also produce broiler chickens and meat chickens in a chicken tractor setup. Fairly easy in a small amount of space. You can produce pretty much all of your chicken needs that way if you would like. Now, personally, I don't produce chicken meat here. I'm a huge fan of chicken eggs, but raising chickens for meat is not really on my radar because there is one that I think is way better and actually leaner and healthier form of protein than chicken, but it's not for everybody. But it's this next one, which is meat rabbits. Now, I know this is controversial because they're so stinking cute. They are cute, y'all, and it is easy to let it tear you up when you're raising them for meat. But rabbits, they are incredibly efficient at producing meat from feed. So what I love about rabbits versus chickens is chickens require grain and corn to get fat and sassy, and meat rabbits pretty much can do it on grass and hay. So it's really, really easy if you have a small amount of space. You can create what they call rabbit tractors, and you can raise out and finish your rabbits on grass. You can fatten them up if you've got plenty of grass. It's easy to grow your own food for rabbits. It's not as easy to grow your own food for chickens. So rabbits, a trio of rabbits, can literally yield up to 100 pounds of meat a year. That's 3 little rabbits, and those rabbits pretty much only are taking up anywhere from 4 square feet plus. So, and they can stack on each other if you use the wire crates. And I'm not advocating for the wire crates. I know there's the colony method as well, where they basically live in deep bedding in a very colony natural setting. Totally a great option as well. But that is a ton of meat for a small space. And additionally, rabbits do this other wonderful thing. They're triple purpose. So some rabbits are great for fiber. Of course, rabbits are good for fur. Now, this is, I'm realizing, a vegan's worst nightmare because I'm not just talking about eating the rabbit, but I'm talking about all the other things you can do with the rabbit. But it is a highly functional product for a small homestead. You end up with byproducts that you can sell. And if you're an avid gardener, rabbit manure is top tier because rabbit manure is a cooler manure, meaning not like cooler as in you're gonna throw your beers in the cooler and you're gonna go on a kayaking trip. It's cooler in that it's not going to burn your plants, meaning you can apply rabbit manure directly to the garden versus chicken manure, which chickens also produce manure, which is a valuable fertilizer, but it's incredibly hot. It's high in nitrogen, which means if you apply it directly to your plants, you can end up with nitrogen burn, and you can actually end up killing your plants by over-fertilizing them. Rabbit manure is not going to do that. Boop it right in the garden, and it's really lightweight. It dries out really easily, and you can sell rabbit manure. Gardeners love some rabbit pellets. Let me tell you, as a gardener, I love the rabbit pellets. So I am a huge meat rabbit advocate. I think ultimately it's probably, out of this entire list, my number 2 livestock on this entire list. Next up, we have one that's not really talked about too much. We've got quail. Now, if you don't know what quail are, they're like baby chickens. That is a horrible way to explain them. But they're so stinking cute. They fit in the size of your hand. and they are used for both meat and eggs. They produce a fair amount of eggs, typically not as much as chickens, but what is amazing about quail, A, the eggs are incredibly high in vitamin A, so they're very beneficial for you, very healthy, and B, they really only require like 1 to 2 square feet per quail. And that is like, you don't need to free range them, nothing. You can literally put them in a dog crate. They'll be happy as can be. All right. They're so easy to take care of, and they convert feed to meat and eggs pretty efficiently. So it's very easy to succeed with about, a handful of 10 quail. You could literally do this on a balcony in your apartment. That is how little space the quail take. It looks like just from eggs, you can easily get $6 a dozen for quail eggs. And if you were to sell those, you could look at anywhere from $1,000 to $1,500 in quail eggs a year by just having about 10 quail. So that's really impressive. And quail typically go from hatch to harvesting weight in about 6 to 8 weeks, meaning if you're wanting to raise them for meat, your turnaround time is very, very, very quick. Of course, they are not very large, so they're really small, maybe not going to go a long way, but again, they can churn out really, really quickly. So it's really easy to raise large batches and stock your freezer. And there is nothing more fancy and posh than pulling out your quail at an event. You're like, yes, we're having Cotonex quail. And people are like, ooh, que français, love that. And same thing with the quail eggs. You can do so many fancy things with those, and people are going to think you are posh, when really you're a homesteader. Next up, we've got goats. I love goats. That is just, there's no doubt. So this really could be goats or sheep, but I'm focusing on goats today. They do take up about the same amount of space, but personally, I'm partial to goats. So we're going to talk about goats. If you want to talk about sheep, go for it. We can talk about sheep. But basically, goats, stocking density wise, you can get away with maybe 7 per solid acre of grass, meaning it's pretty easy to have a quarter of an acre and have a milk goat, maybe 2 milk goats, especially if you're supplementing with feed and hay. So you don't have to get a milk goat. They also make meat goats as well, but I know goat meat is not as widely popular in the United States, although something to note, as more and more people move to the United States, as goat meat is so popular in other areas of the world, it's a rapidly growing segment of the meat market. So we're seeing a lot of declines in the amount of meat consumption in beef, chicken, other sources of protein. But we're seeing a lot of growth in the amount of goat meat produced and consumed, which is really, really fascinating. It's got a really delicious flavor. I think you just have to know how to cook it. And we're a very beef and chicken centric nation, whereas other cultures in the world eat a lot of goat. So I think a dairy goat is a great option because you can produce a couple quarts of milk each day. You can have pretty much your whole dairy covered with goat milk. You've got the raw milk. You can easily make cheese. You can also eat a few of the kids. That sounds horrible to say eat the kids. Oh my gosh. Literal vegan's worst nightmare. You can produce goat meat as a byproduct of the dairy goats. You do have to breed dairy goats to get them to freshen, to have milk, but you don't have to do it every single year. You can milk those dairy goats for a good long while, even after kidding. So I would suggest if you want to have dairy goats, probably getting 2 and alternating the breeding schedule so you always have one that's fresh and one that is pregnant. Vice versa, swap them out when they come into peak milk and freshening. So goats, I think, are great. Again, I think we do not give goats enough credit. So some goats are fiber goats. My goats, for example, are meat goats. I have Tennessee fainting goats, but they also have a cashmere gene, which means they produce cashmere, which is really, really cool. There's also mohair goats. Angora goats produce mohair. And so if you look at that, that one species, you can have a fiber one, you can have a meat one, you can have dairy one. There's a lot of duality in those breeds. and a lot of flexibility and options. And again, another great source of compost on your farm. And my favorite thing, brush clearing. They will clean out spaces in your farm and garden. If it is weedy and gross looking, they will have you covered and take good care of you, which is exactly why I have my goats. My goats are on brush clearance, and that is what they do every single day. They do not take time off. They're eating constantly. Now, my last one, and I believe this is the gem of homesteading, and I would rank this one right up there with meat rabbits. I think I might put it right above meat rabbits because honestly, they're a little more self-sufficient than meat rabbits. And I think that's what I really, really love about them. So this is going to be controversial, more controversial than the meat rabbits, because let me tell you, this animal incites terror in both myself and most people of the world. I am talking about, you guessed it, geese. Now, what is really fascinating about geese and why I'm obsessed with geese is not because they're vicious and territorial and will attack you, which I admire those qualities in an animal and in a person. Not true. But what I really love about geese is that they can eat grass. So out of all the poultry, they actually graze. They're true grazers. So most chickens and quail, ducks, they eat largely grains and insects. They do consume a bit of greenery, but that's not what primarily makes up their diet. Geese, they primarily eat grass. And that is why goose meat, goose flesh, is typically considered more of a red meat instead of a white meat. And it looks a little different, and people say it tends to taste a bit like beef. Now, geese are obviously territorial and actually quite frightening and scary. But if you have the space, geese are very self-sufficient in the fact that they can fairly well take care of themselves, whereas rabbits, not so much. And you can end up with a poultry product that is similar in quality to beef and end up with almost 100% grass-fed food item, very low maintenance, without much effort at all. So they produce lots of meat. An average meat goose can yield anywhere from 7 to 15 pounds of meat easily. So at $12 a pound for goose meat, you're looking at, $84 to $170 per bird just for meat. So if you have three geese for meat every single year, because a goose can lay easily 20 to 50 eggs a year. So if you can just hatch off and raise a couple geese a year out of those, you can end up with easily $500 worth of meat every single year. And really mix it up. In Germany, it's very common for them to eat a Christmas goose instead of a Christmas turkey or Christmas ham. So I think it's just really cool. And it's not something that maybe we consider a mainstream food item here in the US anymore. But it definitely has historically been, and worldwide, it definitely has been as well. So if we break it all down, I think these are some really great options for raising animals and livestock on a small scale. So all these animals work on a small scale, and they all have unique value. They can produce eggs, they can produce different types of meat. It depends on your dietary restrictions, your goals, and what your setup allows. I personally I'm obsessed with geese. I don't have any geese, but my goal is to have a flock of yard geese. The only reason I don't have that yet is because I'm worried that the Prime guy for Amazon will not come into my yard because of the geese, which honestly might benefit my wallet and a lot of other areas of my life. But if I'm not going with the geese, I think rabbits are my next one. I definitely already have goats, huge fan of goats, and I think all of these are amazing on the list. So I hope this helps you kind of get on your small scale homesteading journey and start really thinking about what livestock you might implement. I think if you want a homestead, you must have livestock to make it work and all tie together, as A lot of these critters can eat scraps from your garden and household waste and then metabolize that into food that you can also eat as well. So I hope you love this episode. As always, please like, subscribe, hit the little notification thing so that you're notified when we have new episodes. Leave us a review, and we will see you at the next episode.